You may have heard of people using acrylic inks in the Warhammer hobby, but what are acrylic inks? What can we do with them? Aren't they the same thing as washes? My name is Hero Song, and today I want to give 3 examples of ways we can use acrylic inks to improve our Warhammer models. This is in no way an exhaustive list of what can be done with inks, and I've only started to scratch the surface of what's possible, so if you have any other ideas, please do let me know in the comments what you use them for. I'd really like to learn from all of you. So jumping right in, first things first, we can use inks to add weathering to our models. I have an Astra Militarum artillery unit here that is in need of some battlefield mud on its metal bits. We can use some brown ink from Amsterdam inks to add mud effects, so we'll put a drop on our wet palette. I love the little pipette feature built into these bottles. It makes getting the ink out just so easy. I'm not sponsored by Amsterdam, this is just an ink brand that I bought myself and have tried and really enjoy working with. We'll use a large moist brush to grab some of the ink out of the palette, wipe a bit of it off on the palette so that we don't have too much clinging to the brush, and start applying it to the model in a light dabbing motion. We really want to apply this mud effect sparingly and in places on the underside and low down areas of the metal that would probably naturally be more muddy. We do not want to use this ink like a wash. It'll turn our whole model brown. And speaking of washes, let's compare them with inks for a second. They're very different and can do extremely varied effects for us. So we all probably know and probably use washes. Washes are super thin, relatively low pigment density, and flow in such a way that they seek out the recesses of our models. Part of what washes do for us is apply a tint to our model, but often what we're trying to accomplish with a wash is helping to add shadows to our model. Inks, on the other hand, are also super thin, but they're extremely high in pigment density. Inks also just don't flow the same way as washes, and they tend to behave more like a super flowy paint when they come off our brush. This means that they won't seek out the recesses of our models as much and instead will generally stay where we put them with our brush. I think of inks a little bit like a stain. They won't block out whatever's below them, but they will stain it with whatever their pigment color is. So notice on this model I've applied some muddy, rusty brown stuff to areas of the model that aren't deep recesses, and the color has stuck where I put it. This is a great realistic effect because in real life there could be dirt and grime and rust in areas that aren't just deep recesses. If you put a wash on here, it would just run down into the recess. We want to let this dry a bit, and then we actually will go over it with a wash. The washes, as discussed before, will give us some more depth of color to our recessed areas and also apply a bit of variance to the metal color. We don't want to dump these washes everywhere. We can use some of the ink we just did to do some of our work for us. We just want to apply them thin and relatively sparingly. When this dries, we can examine to see where the inks enhanced our muddy look. Right here where my toothpick is pointing is a great example of where the ink added something to a non-recessed area that a wash probably would have had a tough time adding, since much of the wash would have run into the bottom of this metal. Alright, 1 down, 2 to go. The second trick we can use inks for is to help us edge highlight stuff, like this spear thing held by my Belthanos model. The spear is the last little bit that I have to do on this model, and I really want to make sure it looks as nice as the rest of the paint job. We want to base coat the model the same way we normally would, which I took care of with a turquoisey green thing from Citadel. Once that's done, we'll grab our turquoise ink and drop a tiny bit onto our wet palette. It doesn't matter what your color scheme is here, so long as your ink is a bit brighter than your base coat, this should work fine. We can go ahead and apply our ink just like we might apply a bright paint for a glaze, hitting the upper and raised areas of the spear that we want to be a little bit brighter than the base. The ink flows really well off our brush naturally, so they're really easy to use to get color down on the model. As we discussed before, inks are super pigment dense and they act a bit like a stain on our model. In this case, we're staining a brighter color onto a darker one. This process behaves a lot like a glaze, but it's way easier to do than a glaze, which is awesome. Okay, now time to highlight. So instead of using just a gray or white or something on its own, we're actually going to mix a little bit of our ink into our gray and white in order to enhance the color of our edge highlight. I think of it a little bit like a really pigmented flow medium for our paint. When we mix the paint with the ink, we get all the benefits of the ink as well as some of the benefits of the paint, meaning great flow off of our brush, good pigment density, and also the paint medium and color, so this stuff will really stay where we put it. Once we get the combination right, which honestly doesn't take too much effort, this is an edge highlighting cheat code. We just load our brush and use the side of it to hit the raised, sharp edges and paint the parts that we want highlighted. The paint should come off smoothly with good flow and great coverage. Absolutely beautiful. We can use a thin wash here to deepen the contrast on the dark spots and tie everything together a bit, and at the end we'll definitely get an effect that we can be proud of. Alright, last but not least, third, we can use inks to make an extremely simple glowing effect. This looks great on screens or plasma stuff, both of which I will do here. Let's start with plasma. We'll use a light green color to base coat the plasma coils, using a couple of coats so that we don't lose detail. Then, we hit the top of this with a bright white highlight. We can try to keep the pressure on our brush super light here so we don't accidentally let the highlight go into the deep recesses of the coils. Now, let's grab a green ink and slap it onto the coils with a nice big brush. We actually want to be a little bit messy here and let the ink flow over the sides of the coils onto whatever's around them. Again, ink behaves like a stain, right? So we're intentionally letting some of the green light stain the surrounding area. When we do that, this thing just looks like it's glowing bright. It's super easy and it really creates an amazing effect. Let's try this on a screen as well. I'm going to use exactly the same process. Give it a quick light green base coat, some thin white text lines, and hit it with a green ink. Beautiful, glowing screen effect as fast as possible. Amazing. Well, there you have it. 3 awesome tips and tricks that we can do with our inks. As I said before, this is definitely not an exhaustive list, and I've only started to scratch the surface here. So please tell me your favorite ink tips and tricks in the comments section so that I can check them out and learn from you guys as well. As always, thanks so much for watching. My name is Hero Song, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.